Start recording. Actually, let me... Okay, so should be live. Gonna post announcements. Where's the window? That should be okay. Posting announcements. Post this one. Post the other one. There we go. And the blue sky one. Post. There we go. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Do we have people in the chat? Let me also open it up so I can make sure the stuff is running fine. Hello? Oh, we got Navy. And Grant, already going with Schnoppet. Hello. And Griffin Phyllis.
Schnappy.
The Schnoppe? What is Schnoppe? I know Schnoppet, but not Schnoppe. It's new. That is new. Schnoppet, asterisk. Hello, and we got Bois. We got Bois from Jack the Fox Otter. Hello everyone. Welcome. Is audio okay? Can you hear us fine?
Can you hear us in your ears?
In your brain. We got Koza. Hello.
Hello. Oh wow, I can't believe we have a Schnappet pointer.
Yeah, we got Schnappet. No, it's being dereferenced.
Oh.
Oh, you see, like it's a the Schnoppet, like it's a garbage memory address. So like if you try to dereference it, it'll make your program just spontaneously explode. Like, you know, it's
Yeah.
segmentation. Yeah, it's segfault. Hello everyone. Welcome to the Resonance. I'm Froox, I'm here with Syra, and we're doing another episode of the Resonance. It's sort of like a and we got a cheer from Jake the Fox. Thank you, audio party. Thank you, Jake. I'm gonna make it a big. Thank you. So this is just sort of like a office hours / podcast. You can ask anything about the Resonite, anything you'd like to know, whether it has to do with like technical stuff, like its development, with the theme, community, whatever, like even like just kind of personal stuff, like you wanna kind of ask us things. Feel free to ask whatever. Some questions we might redirect to other... Ooh, thank you so much, Keb, for the subscription.
Thank you very much, Keb.
Yes, gifted sub to Alniminim? I'm not sure. It's Glitch's cutie. Meow. Meow. So yes, you can ask us pretty much anything. We might redirect some questions, like to like other office hours. For example, if there's something to do with moderation, we can give you kind of basic answer, but redirect you to the office hours for the moderation team, which actually happened like an hour and a half before this one. So like if you haven't seen it today, like you missed it, you'll have to wait for next week. But you know, they're weekly, so like they're pretty regular interval. We will also first go into questions from Discord, because we have a channel for people to ask questions in advance. But you're free to ask your questions. Thank you, Jack. Oh my god, Glitch's cuteness. Glitch, you've been proven cute by Twitch bits. Can't argue with that. Yes.
He's got you there.
Yep, hold on, let me make sure this is actually on stream. There we go, and Glitch is just what? Can't argue with that. Oh hey, there's more. It's more evidence. More talking. But yes, feel free to ask questions, you know, in advance. Not in advance. Feel free to questions right now in the Twitch chat. The only thing, make sure you put a question mark in it. That way, it kind of pops on our chat thingy, and we can, like, you know, say it easily. With that, let's get started. I'm gonna find the Discord thread. There's a bunch of questions in there, so let's see. So the first question from Discord is from Papaltine. now that work on audio is starting, can you share about any additional features, fixes that you are prioritizing to include in the rework? In particular, I'm wondering about issue like more realistically accurate default voice volume and roll-off that would provide significant improvements to audio immersion and accessibility. Items of interest, improve default volume and roll-off profile for the realistic pleasing effects, component flex, access to lower audio streams without compression, ability to add custom effects through things like uploaded procedural input responses, components flex notes pre-made with common DSP effects. Audio has potential to make Resonite feel much more polished, since sound has such subconscious effect on the quality of experiences. Oh, thank you for bringing it in. Sense of space, and I'm eager to start testing some of pro audio use cases that this could enable things. So there's a few things in this question. So first, I would actually recommend check out our YouTube channel, because we got a question about what new audio features are gonna come with audio like a few times, and we actually have, I think, 2 videos on the YouTube channel that are like, dedicated to answering that question, so it might be worth checking out. But to your specific questions, for the better roll-off and the realistic and pleasing effects, yes, that is something that we can address with audio, because we are essentially kind of with the current system, the roll-off is pretty much kind of mostly in control of the Unity engine. So whatever math it's doing, it does its own math. With the new system, we're calculating all of that on our own, which means we can plug whatever math we want there, whatever mechanism we want to do. Oop. Probably don't want to move it too much. So whatever kind of mechanism, we'll be able to kind of address it. We'll probably make it match the unities by default for compatibility, just for existing worlds, but there's probably gonna be, more options, more kind of control over things. The one issue with that specific issue, though, is there's still some information I think that we're kind of missing to be able to figure out what the cause of the problem is. So if we don't have that, we might not be able to address it with the initial release, but at the very least, implementing the audio engine, it gives us full control on how the attenuation is calculated. So if we don't address it with the MVP, we'll be able to address it later. The other part is component flex up access to lower audio streams without compression. That's something that will not come with audio. That's not actually even the responsibility of the audio system. What the audio engine is doing is mostly just you have a bunch of audio outputs in your world, they're emitting audio, and the job of the audio engine is to figure out which ones are near you, then sort them by priority based on the priority, volume, and so on, and then render them out, apply whatever spatialization effects, distance roll-off effects and so on, mix them together into a final buffer, and and then provide the output. So it doesn't really do stuff like decoding the audio. That's actually kind of separate from audio, and that's something we already do in Froox engine on our end. So that's kind of separate. So anything that has to do with the specific audio streams, that's not part of this. In general, I would say access to the lower audio streams without compression. With the compression, that part might be kind of difficult, because for this to kind of work over network, the audio needs to be compressed. So for example, Cyrus' voice when he talks is being compressed with Opus codec, and because of that, the bitrate is something 20 kilobits per second. If it wasn't compressed, it would be something a few megabytes per second. So you would absolutely murder a connection if it didn't have any compression. So I would say that's very unlikely. You're very unlikely to get access to the original uncompressed stream for stuff like that. However, there is a separate project that's actually relating to the other questions, components flex notes pre-made with command DSPFX. Protoflex, there's a plan to have a DSP system which is gonna let wire things up, so you can create filters and audio generators and do all kinds of procedural and filtering stuff. That is separate project from the audio engine. That's gonna come at some later point. It's not gonna come as part of the audio engine. but it's also something that's coming in the future. So it'll show up sometime, but not as part of audio. If you would like to, see it sooner, I recommend going to the GitHub, voting that issue. That gives it kind of a bit more priority. And like what else can I say? This gonna open up just like a lot of options for like doing kind of like processing things. Similar thing in the ability to add custom effects or things like upload procedural impulse responses. I don't know exactly what you mean by that. Like it's pretty much the same as the proto flags. Like you'll be able to do like pretty much whatever you want to do to audio. You'll be able to process the audio samples or generate them and apply virus filters to them. So that's a separate feature. And I do think like that one's gonna open up a lot of options. Oh, I remember the other thing. There is also video on the DSP on our YouTube channel, so I strongly recommend giving that one a watch. That delves into like more of the details, how it's gonna work, what features it's gonna offer. Next question is from Tito Ferro. Technical buggy question. 1. The current Unity audio system. If audio is at the end of its playtime, the Unity audio system has to activate stop to give illusion of single play audio, but for some reason it will play millisecond of that start of the clip after countless of mentors. If the process is too slow, the stop will delay audio loops again. Will this be persistent with audio? That's actually... So there's a few misconceptions in that question, like that... Like the actual playback of the clips, that's not handled by Unity at all. That's handled by Froox engine. So like we are not using like the Unity kind of playback functions at all. It's something that's already handled because like the current audio system is a hybrid, and what audio will be handling is pretty much what I described before. Is it's sort of just collecting those sources. But the actual playback of the clips is already handled on our end in Froox engine. And currently we're just piping the data to Unity, but Unity has no idea of of any kind of playback happening. If there's like a millisecond of start of a clip, that's something that might get fixed as part of the audio integration, because just having better control over how and when is the audio, when our audio clip sampled, we can kind of give more data, more kind of events. So some of the things will become more efficient. Like for example, right now one of the problems with the current system is we don't have a way to communicate to Unity easily that some audio just doesn't have any data. It's not playing anymore. So you can have empty audio outputs in the world, but they're still taking, they're taking a slot for the audio number of audio clips you can have in the world, and they're kind of blocking some other audio clips that might actually be playing. With the new system, we can actually have mechanisms so it can communicate that, because we have control over both sides of the system, and make that more efficient. That will also allow does fix up some issues, like for example with timing and other stuff. So there might be a bunch of bug fixes like that. The only thing I would make sure this is reported on our GitHub, because if it's not an issue that's reported and we don't have a replication case for it, it might not get fixed because we just won't really know about it. We won't have any details about that issue. Oh, the next question is crossed out. Just a general request, please keep avoid discussion in the questions chat, because this is making it a little bit difficult for me to kind of parse what's going on, because there's a bunch of discussion going on and now some of the questions are crossed out. So I don't know if I should even answer this or... I don't know, so I should I guess I'll skip that one.
Yeah, if it's crossed out, I'd probably just skip it.
Just, if you're gonna ask a question that you want to discuss with other community, please use other channels. Don't use this one, because it's making it a little bit difficult for me to figure out what's going on. The next part is design questions. One will be a button in PC to forcible switch between left and right hand, or at least node that switches it. Got a hold 2 items from PC homies. we might add like some more like dual-handed kind of interactions. I'm not sure right now like on the specifics, but we might. The only like weirdness is like it makes it a little bit more complicated for users, so that's like I feel that's more advanced user functionality, sort of dual wielding things, because we only got like one kind of like like mouse that you can use for interactions, and you're already kind of using both of the buttons, so it might get a bit weird. So I don't know. It might be too niche, to kind of like do some of the stuff, like for example using two tools at once, and like having different buttons to like interact with each tool, because that it just I don't feel like that kind of like interaction would be fluid, which makes it not very worth like the implementation time. We probably make it like more like make it easy to switch between tools if you want to like if you want to like maybe for like holding items that could make sense. You grab a thing with one and kind of keep holding it, and you can kind of move around, and you don't need to keep like holding a button. So like there's interactions there it could be added. 2. Is there plans to allow modifications to the menu, maybe allowing users to create their own menu design, turning the menu into cell phone, Windows 95 pop-up with sounds? You can already do that. The dash, it's using a system. Thank you, BD underscore, for the subscription.
Thank you, and also Climber J for the previous one that we didn't mention.
Oh yes, sorry I missed that. Thank you, Climber J, too, for a subscription. But yes, I was saying there's something you can already do. Our dash uses a system called facets, which are sort of these modular pieces of UI, and you can like pop them out, you can save them to inventory. Like we actually have the templates for all of them, so you can take them apart, modify them, make your own versions even, and customize like your UI. They're actually, even since you mentioned like the Windows 95 pop-up like with sounds, our team member Aegis, he actually made sort of Windows 95, 98 like style versions of the facets. Actually, sorry, could you pop them out from the inventory? So even that like already exists. So it's gonna show in a second. Just another question, will there be settings option that disables 1 to 9 developer hotkeys, right to hold, left to interact, or right to create a control system, perhaps completely different left or mouse button interaction, where both right and arms is based on the right button? So it sounds like you're asking for like bindings thing. So there's two things. The 1 to 9 hotkeys for the tools, what we actually want to do is when we rework the UI for inventory, we're gonna rework that to be sort of like a special inventory facet where you can like put things into slots that can be bound to specific keys. That way you can put whatever item you want into those slots. So Cyrus kind of showing those kind of versions of those facets. So that's gonna kind of become more flexible, so you can kind of replace it with whatever facet you want. If you don't want it, you can just delete it out. So that's gonna be reworked that way. For the other things, that would be like a binding system. That's something I also want to do, like so you can kind of adjust, which keys and which buttons do what. So that's also gonna come at some point. And they're like giving like some specific like there's like a bunch of things, like ways that players create their own character control interactions. Throw, hold item, rotate, like parkour slide. There's like a bunch of like there's like actually lots of different features, because like you're asking for like buttons to do like parkour slide or throwing items, but like we actually need a mechanism to do do parkour slide or throw items in the first place, and then like binding buttons is other part. So we would need to add those things.
There's just a few of them.
Yeah, so like you can like find these, you can kind of replace them. If you'd like, and you can make your own. Like lots of people make their own versions and modify them. So,
yeah,
it's a lot of options.
And if you're wondering where these ones in particular are, these are already in the Resonite Essentials /facets /reso98 if you want to use them.
Yeah. Next question is from Josh. Will we see the return of official Resonite headlesses hosting worlds, especially social ones? I feel like they're a great idea and method to show off worlds that might be underused to lighten the load of users that might not have the specs in turn to host potential large world. Probably at some point. We don't have any specifics right now to announce. Next question's from Din Imbrek Val. Hi, I want to know, are there any plans for dedicated external servers for Resonite, like for Minecraft? Instead of relying on Resonite servers for certain things, there could be an option to go the worlds hosted on a non-Resonite server, open inventories, hosted external servers, like a mod that allows you to use local storage inventory, or even be present in multiple worlds hosted on many different servers. Thanks. So there's also like a few different things in that question, because like you're talking about like, you know, hosting sessions, but also talking about inventory, and those are actually very separate things. So one thing is, you know, like hosting the session, that's sort of like, you know, the world you are in, and, you know, the people you communicate, and it's sort of responsible, you know, for whatever's happening in that world, whatever modifications, whatever, you know, communicating with the users in the session and so on. You can, you know, right now you can host your own sessions. We would eventually want to kind of provide sort of managed service, so you can, like, you know, you could essentially just like say, like, I want to host this world. You know, our system would spin up a headless for you, you know, loaded world. Once everybody leaves, it spins it down. So that's something we would like to provide in the future as well. There will be like also like a paid service as well, because hosting, you know, the servers, it does cost like some resources, but it will make it way kind of easier to do that, because the way we want to approach it is make it, you know, very integrated into Resonite. Because right now, if we want to host something, you have to set up a headless, you have to find a server, you have to run, you know, scripts, you have to create a config file and so on. And our goal for our own system would be, like, you know, you literally go, like, in a word browser, you find a world that you like, and you're like, I want to host this on a headless, and it just does everything for you. So we would like, you know, want to offer that kind of thing. The other part of the question is, you know, like inventories. Inventory, like, that's part of the cloud service, so that's something, you know, that's not dependent on any particular world, and we don't really have any plans to like have like a sort of non-Resonite version of it, because that one's a fair bit more complicated, because the inventory, it's sort of tied into, like, you know, the rest of like Resonite, like where there's actually a number of different kind of services that are sort of like, you know, tied into one. So like, even though like it seems like a simple system, there's actually kind of a lot happening under the hood. Like, for example, when you're, you know, saving items into inventory, you know, it's responsible for doing stuff like asset deduplication, making sure only like a single version gets saved, making sure, you know, that stays efficient, but also for most of these assets, our system generates, you know, metadata, and it generates asset variants, which are sort of like efficient versions of those assets that actually end up being loaded by the client. So there's kind of like a lot kind of going on, which makes it a little bit, you know, harder to like, oh, thank you, Nuki-kun, for the raid.
Being rated.
So that makes it a little bit more difficult, you know, to like have a custom like third-party version of it. So that's probably something that we won't like make available, at least not in the foreseeable like future.
Yeah. And if I may interject, just to so that nobody misconstrues it, you will always be able to host your own like headless server as well, just in case you
Yes.
thought we might just want to get rid of that one day. We don't want to ever get rid of that. You'll always be able to do that.
Yeah. Like, we plan like to keep like you know, the headless software accessible. So it's essentially like what we want to do is provide you a convenience option. So like, if you don't want like any of that hassle, you can have something that's really integrated. But if you really want to, like, you know, dig into on your own, like, you can always access the headless software and like do your own hosting on your own hardware with your own kind of configuration. It's kind of like, you know, like Minecraft, where you know, people you can host your own Minecraft server, and you can also, you know, just get like a service that can host it for you and removes a lot of the hassle with it. So we want to kind of follow that kind of model.
And I just read the rest of those questions or the discussion, and
Yeah, it
it's no
seems
more
just
questions after that
discussion.
one.
I don't think I'm gonna get into this one since it's like, you know, discussion, so we'll probably move. We're also kind of getting kind of far in. So I think you're gonna, like, you know, for the questions on Discord, and again, please, for the next time, like, try to avoid discussion. We want to discuss things, use the other channels in our Discord, but keep this one, you know, kind of clean for the questions, because it makes it a little bit more difficult, like, figuring out, like, what is a question and what isn't. Okay, so with that, that's the questions from Discord, so let's check what we have. So we got a bunch of questions already piled up. There's the Schnoppe. Well, this one meant to be Schnoppet, but it's just Schnoppe. I don't know, but there's a Schnoppet with a pointer, so like, you know, we can answer that one. Actually have... Actually... Oh, jeez. Actually have one, maybe?
Okay.
So there's like one thing that like, for those of you who don't know, Schnoppet, it's almost a thing we kind of started doing where Grant just sends it at the beginning, and it's like, one of the meanings of this is like, you know, something that at the thought of it, it makes you just instantly like disintegrate or explode. And we kind of like use it like, you know, to kind of like do sort of like little PSAs about some of the issues that we know we sometimes face. One of them that like ends up kind of like bugging me sometimes, like that happens quite a lot, is something called the XY problem. And this is a very well-known kind of problem, like, you know, in software engineering, where somebody has a problem X, and they think they can solve it by having Y. So then they go to developers and they ask them, can you add Y? And the developers will be like, well, that's kind of weird, like, why would you want that? And it turns out, you know, that like, they want to solve problem X, but they don't tell developers they want to solve problem X. And as a result, you know, like, it makes it kind of hard, because when you tell developers I want to solve problem X, they'll be like, oh, there's a solution Z, which is much more fitting, much easier, much less janky, but it can be really difficult to do when you tell them just about Y, and you don't tell them about the problem X. And this kind of happens regularly, like, you know, with our GitHub, like, where people ask us, you know, for a very specific way to solve particular problem. Like, they run into, like, you know, something's not working like right, or something's causing issues, and they'll make an issue asking for a very, like, just make these changes. And we're like, why would you, like, these are weird changes to make. And the main problem with that is, like, you know, like, it's for us to work more efficiently, focus on telling us the problem first. What is the issue you're actually trying to solve, not how you solve it. Because figuring out how to solve issues, that's our job. Like, we're the engineers, we have, like, you know, deep knowledge of the engine, we have deep knowledge of the platform, we have deep knowledge of, like, where we want the platform to be heading in the future, like, you know, things that are being developed, things, you know, all the different kind of issues, so we can find a solution that works the best. That's like the best solution for the platform and for the where the platform is heading, and it will just, you know, cause us the least amount of problems. But when you ask for a very specific way to solve that problem, one, it kind of, you know, ties our hands, so like we, you know, like asking us to do something that might be complicating our work a lot and complicating some of the future work. And also, like, we have to kind of figure out what is the problem you're trying to solve with it. So it's like, to give you a practical example, and I'm not even gonna use something that's, you know, from software engineering. Imagine we have a chair, and imagine we have a chair, and the chair, like, you know, one of the legs is too short, and the chair is wiggling, and you're like, okay, I can solve it, you know, I can solve it by putting a book there, but you don't have a book that fits the exact gap, so you're like, okay, I need a book that has, you know, exactly this amount of pages. So you go, like, you know, to the shop and you ask, do you have a book that is, like, you know, has this amount of pages? And the librarian will be like, what? Why would we be asking for a book with this many pages? You know, like, that's a very weird request. And it turns out, you know, like, they might not know, you know, you're trying to solve a problem that you have a crooked chair. But if you go and ask, my chair is crooked, one of the legs is too short, maybe they'll be like, oh, here's a carpenter. Actually, is that the right word, carpenter? I think so. Like, there's, like, you know, a woodworker, that's a better word. There's this person who's a woodworker, they're gonna fix the chair for you by actually, you know, fixing the leg size, by, you know, adding a perfect thing for it. And that's kind of like, you know, what the XY problem is. Like, you know, you want to tell them the the root of your issue, the problem you're having, which is in this case is like your chair is crooked and it's wiggling and you don't want it to be wiggling. But if you go and ask somebody, hey, can you find me a book that has this amount of pages, it can be hard to figure out, like, you know, that the problem you're trying to solve is that your chair is wiggling, and there might be much better solution, which is just fixing the leg. So I hope that kind of analogy helps to understand better, you know, like the kind of issue, and like where focusing on the root of the issue it makes my work much more easier, and it also makes it easier for you because we can figure out like a really good solution for your problem. You know, because if I go back to the analogy with the chair, if you got, you know, the book, then you still have the issue, like, you know, there's like now a book on your floor, and now you want to move the chair, you know, the book is not attached, so you have to move with it, so like, it's a very janky solution to that problem. But if the leg is just fixed, if they literally just, you know, glue or nail, like, you know, a leg extension to fix it, then it's a much cleaner solution. And if you tell us, you know, your problem, we can give you a much cleaner solution as well. So that's my schnoppet for today.
Let's see, do I have a schnoppet? Yeah, I think I have a small schnoppet. Actually.
A schnoppetlet.
You
don't have a schnoppet, you have a schnoppe.
A schnopplet.
A schnopplet.
Basically, I was working on one of my friends' piece of Froox yesterday, and I noticed on the slot that the Froox was on, it had a virtual parent, you know, to try and make the like when you unpack the Froox, it like tries to move to a position that appears constant even though it's still parented like to the user. Oh man, those make me like turn red in the face because like it makes me so, it's just so messy. Like it just makes it really glitchy, like to work with the Froox, and it makes it really laggy when you're constantly transforming like all the Froox around and stuff. Don't do that. Just like hack it normally and get out of your avatar.
This little schnopplet.
Just a little schnopplet.
Okay, so we should go start with the questions, the actual questions. The first questions we have is from Spooky Bee. Hi Froox, will Res have ability to play avatar animations akin to how it works in VRChat? Unsure if it's already a feature or it's possible, thanks for your time in advance. So, it kind of depends what exactly you mean. We do want to like expand our animation system and make it something, you know, we can blend between the IK and the avatar. So there's gonna be systems for that in the future. In what exact form they'll take, I can't tell you right now, so it might be different from the way it is in VRChat. It's gonna be like similar and allowed probably for similar kind of use cases, but I can't promise you that it's gonna, you know, work exactly same how it does in VRChat. But yes, the animation system is something we would like to kind of expand in the futures. Next questions. Grandi K is asking, does Blitto display work for making another window to be rendered to my manually added camera? It might, I don't actually remember. It might have some issues with like other screens. It's something that kind of needs to be revisited and reworked probably. You can try, but do it at your own risk. Next question is button for Nessus. What?
I think they misspelled new session.
Button for new session. I don't know what this is in context of.
Yeah, you need context.
Yeah. If you're asking a question that has like, you know, anything to do with what we said, please include the context in the question itself. Otherwise, like, you know, when we get to the question, we might have, you know, went through a bunch of different questions before that, and we won't have like, you know, the whatever context that question was asked in. Next question is from Cab. A lot of B's. Will audio come with components or something so things like fall off can be tweaked for a world? Or will any settings be more user-facing? I think it would be neat to create a sort of spooky audio environment for a horror-themed world or things like that. just kind of depends on the specifics. Like, one of the things I'm actually thinking is sort of, decoupling the fall off. So like, it's kind of separate component, and you can kind of plug a bunch of different ones, make it very more modular, similar how the particle system is. I'm not still 100% decided on it, because I also don't want it to be too messy, where like, if you want to have an audio output, you now need like several components just for that. So like, that's like one side, but it might be that just like, few built-in kind of audio like fall functions, and then you can have like a third mode, which is like a custom one, and you give it a reference, and you can have like a shared one. The other part would be, how you're actually controlling the multiple components, because it almost sounds like, you want it to be like something that's not even on the audio output itself, but something that's more global. And that is something that also might be added, because one of the things I'm kind of thinking is, doing sort of like listener tweaks, where the listener itself can specify sort of modification to the fall-off. It's almost like, creating more or less sensitive microphones. So like you can say like this only picks up things that are like really close to it, but like, stuff that's like further away, it has like a curve that kind of attenuates things. So there might be also an approach where, that is kind of exposed, and you can make it kind of modify how the audio kind of falls off, like, in the world, so it's kind of controlled from both sides. Again, I don't have like the details yet, like on exactly how that's gonna be done, but like it's something kind of figuring out, because one of the things I do wanna that audio already has implemented is support for multiple listeners. So you can have like, the main listener, but you can also have, for example, you can have like one for the camera. That's gonna be a cool feature where like, the cameras are gonna be able to render audio from its viewpoint and render it out, but also make like a little microphone that's like, literally in the world, it's like capturing some audio around it, and you can output it in a different part of the world, and you can like, make it so it doesn't capture stuff super far away, but only that stuff that's really close to it. And that would use that kind of feature where the listener is modifying the fall off. The other use case for that is, for more fancier versions of like earmuff, like, where you can earmuff like, any sounds, you can kind of adjust the curves a bit, for pretty much like everything. So it's probably going to be some ways, again, not 100% sure on the specifics yet, but very likely it's going to be some options. I mean, that's the benefit of making our system is, we get to control how it works, so we can, like, it makes it much easier to do these kinds of features. It's actually gonna make a bunch of things more efficient too, because one of the things with the current system is like, we provide volumes for, different classes. Like, there's the master volume, but there's a multimedia and voice volume, sound effects, UI sounds, and so on. Right now, when you change those volumes, that actually triggers an event, and it updates all of the audio sources. All of the audio sources will recalculate, their volume and send it to Unity. With this system, we can actually, like, what I plan to do is like add a mechanism where the audio outputs themselves are linked to particle group volume, and it just calculates it on the fly as it needs and makes it way more efficient. So it's gonna be stuff like that. Next question is from Lexevo. How do you the team motivated to work on Resonite? I feel like most of our team is like very largely self-motivated, because for a lot of us it's a platform, that's our home, and it's something that we want to see build, and then we don't want to give up on. So a lot of it, like, we don't really have to do like anything special. Like, the people we have on the team are people who really want to be working on this project. They want to be, part of it, and they want to make this place better for themselves and for everyone else. So I would say that's pretty much it. I mean, like, Sarah, how are you motivated?
I mean, Froox is right. There's nothing, we don't keep people motivated, we just are. This is our home. I mean, there's a reason we fought for 2 years to save it.
Yeah. Like, we we're actually in a situation, even some talks where some people were like, most teams and people would have just given up, like they would have just walked away, but we didn't, and we did go through hell for quite a while, just to kind of keep our dream kind of going. So yeah, we're like very like the place is our home, and like it's something that really like nobody else is really building anything like this. It's almost like it feels like most companies wouldn't build this, because a lot of companies are just focused, more on, quick return on investment, like, just getting, like, getting tons of investment, like popping something out quick, solving problems later. But that approach is ultimately kind of flawed to making something like this, because like for something like this you need to make sure you got your fundamentals right, and the fundamentals, like a lot of them, they kind of go like they even go like before I started doing VR, where I was like making like this kind of game engine that all of the concepts are, like in Froox engine and Resonite, and it's sort of like, set like the really strong fundamentals that allows us to do a lot of the stuff that makes Resonite unique. But it's something, you couldn't really go to a company and like ask for like, like investment on that, because like it's very long term. So it's like I do feel it's very like unique in that regard.
Yeah, like like we don't make this explicitly because we think this is what people want. We're making this because we think it's cool and we want to share it with you.
Well, it's because what we want.
Yeah,
like Resonite, it's like
want.
one of the things, like a lot of this, like, like I'm like, I want this kind of thing to exist, and I feel like that's like the best kind of approach to building something really cool, and something that gets people interested, is because like there's actually the other part, is because like a lot of the companies, like they become like, like, oh, like market research, what people like, what people like, are like talking about, and just try to like figure out something that might match, whatever their market research tells them. But the problem is, there's like that famous Henry Ford quote, like where actually I don't remember it like verbatim, so I might be paraphrasing it a bit, but he was like, if I build like what people asked me to, I would have made a faster horse instead of making cars. And it's that kind of like mentality, like where that only kind of gets you so far, because like generally what people ask you for, that's gonna be some sort of just iteration of like what they already know. Usually people will not ask you for something that's, fundamentally new on some level. Next question is from BD underscore question. Any plans to refactor some of the VRIK setup on Asset Importer and various setup asset avatar creator to be more automatable? Yes. Essentially my feelings for the current avatar creator is make a brand new one. Well, some bits, like some heuristics will be reused, but like mostly make a new one and throw the current one into the fire, which is conveniently, behind us. Right there, it's gonna get thrown into the sun. So yeah, I kind of want to throw it away. Like there's a lot of kind of weird issues with it. Like it's structured in a fundamentally like way that like doesn't work well with Resonite now. So yeah, that's gonna be reworked. We also do want to rework the IK itself, because that has like a bunch of issues. We want to have our own, so it like fits the platform, and those components, they kind of work with each other really well, because for example for the IK, we want to make it so you can like adjust it more dynamically. The current one, you kind of have to initialize it, and then like it's kind of hard to change it afterwards. And it's because how the original is sort of designed, because the original it's a port from final IK, which means it's like it doesn't fit with the way platform works super well. So we kind of want to replace that. And as a result, it kind of puts some limitations on the avatar creator, because the avatar creator has to be built around how the IK works to some extent. So we're probably gonna rework the IK first, and once that's done, that's gonna make reworking the avatar creator to be more dynamic. So, you know, something like you take a model, you say that's an avatar, it becomes an avatar, and then you can just open it anytime, make adjustments, you know, adjustments to proxies, adjustments, you know, to where stuff is. You can change stuff more dynamically. So yeah, we do want to rework it. Next questions from OZ. From my understanding, duplicating protoflags or slots within protoflags means recompiling the node group, which could be heavy dependent on the duplication amount. Would future static protoflags assets mean they don't have to recompile and spawn duplicated? So one, yes, duplicating protoflags does actually have to like recompile that section, because you're essentially creating, even though the code is same, you know, the system doesn't know that. So like it's just gonna, you know, make another group, which takes more CPU usage, takes more resources. The thing is, you don't need the static protoflags assets for that. The problem will be solved by having nested nodes. Because with nested nodes, you make only one template, and you have instances of it. They're just referencing the template. There's only one compiled variant, and the other ones are just referencing it. So you don't need the static protoflags assets, you know, for that. Static protoflags assets, they will work with nested nodes, because you can have, like, you know, a bunch of nested nodes defined in a static protoflag assets, but it is not necessary to avoid the duplication thing. Just having the nested nodes is gonna solve that problem. Next question is from Bitcrack IGN. In a previous resonance, you mentioned that collections might be the next in line after the splitting. When adding those, do you think you will rework some existing nodes to use collections instead? Was a node you'd be excited to add, since it won't be blocked anymore? So the nodes are probably not gonna be reworked like the existing ones, because we kind of avoid... Well, there's actually one maybe. But most of the nodes, we avoid adding any nodes that would essentially be workarounds for the collections. So you mostly collection support is just gonna add new nodes. And there might be new variants of nodes that are already there. For example, Raycast 1, you know, that gives you like one hit result. And there's gonna be a variant called Raycast All that's essentially gonna give you a list of all the hits, and you can, like, you know, loop through that list and, you know, filter it whatever way you want, you know, gives you more flexibility. But there's still benefit to Raycast 1, because under the hood with the physics engine, Raycast 1 is actually more efficient, because it is like, one, it doesn't need to build the list, and it can kind of, you know, skip some of the calculations. Like if it sees, you know, if it's like building a list and it sees, okay, this hit is closer than the previous one, this hit is further than the last one, I'm not even gonna bother doing any further calculations, I'm just gonna reject it. Versus Raycast All, it still has to do all those extra calculations, because it needs to put the results of those in a list. So you'll just have, like, you know, both versions of those nodes. The one that's probably gonna be reworked a little bit, or maybe expanded, is the HTTP, like, request nodes. Because we're probably gonna make that work, like, but it's also, like, more, like, there's gonna be some modifications to it, and it's more just, you know, adding more variants to it. Like, for example, one of the things we'll be able to do is change it so you can, you know, have more flexible options for specifying the message payload, and you'll be able to do stuff like, you know, byte, like, arrays, like binary messages, because byte array, like, you know, it's literally a collection of bytes. You can put it whatever data you want in it. You know, you construct like a HTTP payload to it, and you can send it off the server or a WebSocket. So yeah, it's mostly gonna be new nodes. Also, it's probably gonna be, like, I would want to prioritize it kind of soon after the splitting. The decision on what the next priority has not been made yet. It is definitely high on the list, but I don't want to make, like, any specific promises right now. Next question is from Dusty Sprinkles. Relating to issues and the XY problem, what do you want a user to do as far as how something works in-game? There's no way of knowing component isn't working as intended and making a switch with that as a basis. Like, what we're asking you is, like, relatively simple. Just tell us what you're trying to do, not how you're trying to solve, not how you think the problem should be solved. Like, if you Like, if you like, if you run into a component and like you're trying to like, you're trying to do something, like I mentioned like earlier, the example with the chair is like, it's like, like go to the start, like when you started solving a problem, because it's a process. Like, you start with a problem. Oh, my chair is wiggling. How am I gonna solve it? I'm gonna put a book under it. Oh, I don't have a book that's the right size, so I'm gonna go and ask for a book of specific size. What you should do at that point is to be like, okay, like I want to ask somebody for a book that's specific size. Where did I start with this problem? I started with a problem being that the chair is wiggly. Ask us that. Tell us, the chair is wiggly. I don't want it to be wiggly. You can tell us I tried, solving it by putting book under it, but please tell us, start with, the root problem. Like, what were you trying to solve? What is the issue you're running into?
Yeah, the issue is not one of like knowledge base. Like, you don't need to know a lot about the engine to just tell us what you're doing. I always have to ask people like, well, okay, you want this, but like, what are you trying to do?
Yes.
Like, just tell me that, please.
Like, we're not asking to know how components work. We're just asking you, tell us what your original root issue is. And kind of, asking like for a very specific kind of feature or thing or bug fix or something. Just like be like, you literally say, I'm trying to use this component. I'm trying to do this thing. This is what happens instead. There's actually an issue, like there's a good video that I played on the last like Resonance. Like it's literally, I'm just gonna quote it. Like it's like, you just tell us. What did you see happen if there's a bug, not what did you think happened. And it's like, the kind of clear distinction. Next question is from Alex Taco Anton. Hi, will you add the optional configurable Unix socket named pipe for external communication controlling headless client via localhost type connections? If it's not possible, we know the possible workaround with system meet device, STD out, and system socket standing from. So this is a good example. So like, you're asking us for Unix socket named pipe. You're asking us for a very specific way to kind of control headless, but like the key issue is like, you want to control the headless, from something. There's multiple solutions to that. It doesn't have to be Unix socket named pipe. It can be TCP. It can be like, REST API. There's lots of, different approaches for solving this kind of problem. For a specific question, I don't think we'd probably do like named pipes because that's very system specific. We would actually probably do something more like TCP or REST API or WebSocket, because those are like a lot more commonly used, more accessible with libraries. We do want to add mechanism for like controlling the headless from external software and sort of building user-made tools. There should also be like even GitHub issue about it. We haven't decided on the mechanism yet. Probably not named pipes, like much more likely something like, WebSocket or TCP or REST API. Like those are my kind of top candidates. And, building something on top of those. Grandique is asking, follow-up to the bit-to-display question. I have tried bit-to-display with display index 1 and it creates black screen with any texture. 0 works but replaces user view unless they're in VR. Is this a bug to be reported on GitHub and on the display makes black secondary window? I'm probably. If it's like, so, yes. I would say so, yeah. I don't know if we'll prioritize anytime soon. We might actually end up reworking that component a fair bit. So like it might still report it, but I don't know if we'll. I feel like we're not gonna prioritize and we're just gonna sort of rework how it works.
Yeah, that one might kind of be like a Unity specific kind of like implementation too.
Yeah, like it's something we need to kind of revisit. Next question is barely weird. Kind of like Godot and other open source projects, people contribute because they want to it, not just profit and growth.
I think they were responding to someone else in the chat there.
It feels like they're responding to like, how we're keeping team motivated. Yeah, like if you If you have like follow-up questions, like please include the context, otherwise like we don't actually know what you're responding to. Yeah, it might be something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how to answer this one. Oops. So next question's from Grand UK. Would IK rework likely involve making, tweaking, and customizing IK on component on avatar easier? Yes, that is one of the goals. It's to make the IK sort of be more, what's the word for it? To make it more idiomatic to Froox engine and to Resonite, how stuff works, which is, in turn gonna make it easier. But possibly also like splitting it up to be more modular, so you can kind of compose more complex behaviors. It's kind of similar approach like we took like with Photon Dust. Next questions from Grand UK. Would nested nodes be similar to normal programming language concept of functions? Yes, it's kind of similar. You can think of them as functions. There's like one key difference that's a bit like doesn't map like fully one-to-one, is that you can send impulses out of nested nodes to the outside of them, and then the control flow actually returns back, and you can send more impulses, which is something like you can kind of think of it as like if you had a function as if you passed a delegate to that function, but the delegate is actually like it's almost like a closure in a way too, like where you keep the context of whatever the caller of that node is, so it doesn't map fully one-to-one, but mostly you can think of them as functions, yes. Each nested node is also like, if it has any local variables, it actually has its own copies, and for each invocation, that's essentially a fresh one. Is even like, allocates new stuff like on the stack.
I like this next question, I'm afraid it's...
Good. So, Zenkri Dragon is asking, do you think that Resonite will, or even can, move to the old Linux model of development with you as Linus? That is open source, with you as our benevolent dictator, and people like Gins and Aegis will being your lieutenants? I don't know if I like the terminology. I'm not sure. I don't know how that would work. Because, like, how would it work, like, for a company? Like, how would we be able to, like, like, essentially the main concern is, like, so we're actually able to do this, full-time. Because I feel like if we're not able to do Resonite full-time, that would kill the project. Because, like, it does require a lot. And if we're not able to do a lot, I think it's gonna, like, it's not gonna move fast enough, and, like, we're not gonna be, like, able to kind of keep up with things. So, I don't know how that model would really work. Like, what would, like, the business model be? Like, how would the development be funded? Maybe sometime in the far future when it kind of grows, maybe, like, that becomes different conversation, but right now I don't know. I don't think that would necessarily work for this. It's something that might change, but, like, right now, yeah, I don't see that, like, working. Next question is from how to pronounce it? Diami? Any plans on adding a feature similar to Redux? And if so, would there be a way for people to add their folder item to it? Would it just show up on any that was shared? Yeah, we actually have planned for Resonite workshop. So that's a topic that we did cover on previous resonances. There's also a video on it on our YouTube channel, so I do recommend giving them a watch. But essentially the idea is, it's like on your dash, you would have like, workshop, and you can like browse it by categories. You could like find avatars, tools, gadgets, worlds, like, protoflags nodes, textures, materials, whatever you want. People could submit it, people could update them, and to be searchable. So I think it's actually one of the features like I'm particularly looking forward to adding, because I feel that's gonna make sharing content much easier. Because right now, like, this whole thing, like, we have to know somebody who has good shared folders and have to find things that way. With the actual workshop, you know, it's accessible to everyone from beginning, and we can build on top of it too. So for example, you know, with the material tool, we can just be like, find a material, you type, you know, a keyword, like for example, you want a wood material, so you type wood and a bunch of materials, you select one, it pops in the tool, and you just use it. You know, we can integrate it with other parts of the software. So yes, that's planned. I do recommend watching that video because we go into a lot more detail on it, but Resonite workshop, that's gonna be, I think it's gonna be like a big boon to the community. Next question, Grande K is asking, would collections enable creation of custom object tracks as the programming definition of object? Not really, not collections. Like if you, like, you can use it to sort of emulate like object tracks, by, you know, having like a dictionary where you have like, you know, a bunch of properties saved under keywords. But that is, like, if you say that you want the actual programming definition of object abstract, which to me means for abstract, that's like, you know, a value type where literally you specify the memory layout. It's like, you know, a fixed size. So for example, you know, it can be example 64 bytes, and it has like properties these and these on these addresses. That's not a collection, you know, that's a different kind of concept. Same with objects, you know, kind of similar. This defines the layout, but they're more, you know, they can be like allocated on the, well, they're always allocated on the heap, you know, we can have like multiple things pointing to them. And they also can define methods, you know, which is again like something that's outside of collections. So if you go in the programming definition of those, then the answer is no. Next question from Moonbase. Hey Froox, wondering if you're expecting any Unity bugs or limitations when doing the split of Froox engine and Unity. I'm sort of expecting a limitation, but at least with 2016, but it's just me. I don't really... Yeah, 2019. I don't really expect any like limitation. I mean, like, the whole point is like, you know, we're getting away from those limitations because we're actually moving stuff out of Unity, so we're not limited by Unity. So, like, you know, I would say like it's the opposite. If you're saying like expecting a limitation, I don't really know what kind of limitation. You would have to kind of specify, but I'm not really expecting like any.
Like the only real like limitation we would still have is the fact that we would still be beholden to its rendering pipeline, but other than that, we'd be pretty much free. Yeah.
Yeah, the render like will still like, you know, be relying on like Unity itself, but the rest, like, you know, we're free. And that's the goal, like we do want to replace the render too. Next question is from BD_. Question, is there any way to disable loading an asset dynamically until it's needed without breaking things like cloud, site, garbage collection, processing? So if you don't want to break, like, there's two ways you can kind of go about it. One of them, so right now Resonite, it uses sort of like asset reference tracking to determine if asset should be loaded or not. So if there's nothing referencing an asset, it actually doesn't get loaded. The problem is, it's like, what's the word? It's not like cascaded, which means if you have an asset, like a material asset, that's referencing a texture, but nothing is referencing the material, that texture is still loaded because the material is referencing to it. Because there's no way for that material to communicate to the texture that the material itself is not being used. One of the features we want to add, like one of the optimization, is cascading asset dependency. And what that will do is, we have, for example, mesh renderer. If the mesh renderer is like disabled, or maybe like none even exists, the material will know that it's not needed, so it's not going to be loaded, and it's in turn going to tell the texture, I don't need you, and the texture might not be loaded until, like, you know, something actually says like that it needs it, and it propagates all the way through. To get around it, you can kind of set the references to null and kind of store them like elsewhere and load them dynamically. The problem with that is, you know, like if you have the references null, if they're not actually on the asset, Resonite, you know, the cloud, it will see like, okay, this is not being used, I'm just gonna delete it from the cloud, and, you know, the asset goes poof. One way to around it is you actually save copies of all those assets into your inventory. That's gonna keep them pinned. they're gonna stay on the account, and that's gonna make it so they don't they don't need to they don't get deleted, and you can kind of dynamically assign references to them in the actual content, but you do need to have a saved version. Grandike is asking, what world are you in? So, actually deleting this one too.
Sunset Galaxy.
Yeah, this is Sunset Galaxy by Hamocorp. This is the winner in the social world category in MC for the small world. It is a very, very cool world. I'm actually just showing you a very small portion of it. Oh.
Oh dear.
It's like this sort of bus that goes through multiple worlds, and pretty much almost every single world that you see, you can go there. Like, you can actually, like, you've probably seen us, kind of fly and kind of stop, but some of them, the bus, it'll literally stop at these worlds. You can step out, and there's, there's little, worlds in the place. Actually, we could just go, at the next stop, maybe. We'll have to take it.
Like we might be headed somewhere. I don't know. We'll have to see.
We'll have to see. We might pop out. We might pop out of the bus. Just make it more fun.
Yeah.
We still got an hour left, so... There's actually one place I really like. It's actually that one, the green planet. I really like that one. It has a really nice vista. I thought the snow one is really good too. I like the snow one.
Yeah.
It has really cool wisps coming from the... It's funny because the ice world is called Hell. But yes, this is this one, the social VR small team category.
I think you switched the camera or something. You zoomed it in.
Oh, it's fine on my end. It might be the bug.
Oh, okay. Well, I can only see my elbow in it.
it's fine on my end, so it should be fine.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a bug. Oh, looks like we are stopping somewhere. Where are we going? Oh, this is the desert planet. I don't want to be on the desert one. It has a volcano though.
The green one.
Yeah, I want on the green one. There's also a tiny moon that has super low gravity. Yeah, we're gonna pop out at the green one. The green one I probably like the most, and the snow one. Actually, yes. I'll get out on either one. But yeah, I definitely recommend checking out this world. Also, it's British. It's literally if I zoom out. Oh, never mind. Oh, yeah, I have to disable occlusion. If I zoom out, we are literally in a a British double-decker kind of bus kind of thing. Just zooming out. There we go. Just flying through space. Ooh. And it kind of stops. Yeah, I think we're going for a stop now. It's actually funny because they even in little places they put there's British power plugs.
That's funny.
Yeah, this has really nice vistas. I'm just watching on the camera. It reminds me a bit of Outer Wilds too. As one of the judges said too, it just has Outer Wilds vibes. Traveling through a small solar system. There's a bunch of options too. Yeah.
I suppose while we wait for the next stop, we could answer the next question as well.
No, hold on, I was messing with the camera.
Okay.
Actually, if you don't mind me messing with the camera, you can answer it. But I'll be moving the camera around.
Okay. Question for Cyro, is the sweeps that you're making using fixed time step physics? Okay, so the sweeps that I'm making and a fixed time step those are two different concepts, but they can be used together. So the first part of that question is the sweeps, and what sweeps are you can essentially kind of think of them as thick raycasts almost. You're essentially, casting something into the scene, but instead of an infinitely thin line, you're casting a shape that has volume or like, you know, like different dimensions on any axis. Like, for instance, a capsule or a cylinder or a box or a sphere. And you can use those to kind of get more broad like information from like the physics engine, rather than like a raycast. Like, so if you're using like raycasts to like do like, say, vehicle physics, they won't like fall through like a 1 nanometer crack in the geometry or anything. So you can actually kind of almost also think of it in reverse, where like a raycast is just like an infinitely thin sphere, an infinitely small sphere sweep, which means it has like no surface or whatever, I guess, if you really want to. But the second part of that question is references fixed time step physics. Now, when you talk about like fixed time step physics, there's this concept, it mentions it, called a time step. And what that is that's like the amount of time between each like simulation frame in like the simulation. And in some simulations, what you do is you pass in how much time it took to render the current frame, and you use that to determine like, you know, how far things have moved in the simulation. And that works pretty okay. It can kind of get kind of funky when you get kind of low FPS, because then things start getting really weird when they accidentally like move through each other and kind of shake around and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But when you use when we talk about fixed time step physics, instead of changing the amount of like time that you're telling the simulation has passed, you're keeping that time constant, and instead what you're doing is you're running more simulation steps per frame or less, depending on, you know, how fast you want the simulation to run. And that generally tends to give you like better like results in the consistency of the math, but it can be prone to like runaway conditions where, you know, your game lags and then you simulate more, and then it makes your game lag more, and then you simulate more because it's trying to catch up, and you just like explode.
It's almost like if you're learning R slow, you're making you do even more work to compensate for the slowness, which makes it run even slower because it's more work.
Yeah, there are ways to, you know, avoid that by having like a maximum number of steps that it can simulate per frame.
But
it really depends, like, you know, on your use case for that. Now, I'm not using them together because the action of performing a sweep is something that you do in the simulation. So
it's essentially instant, like it doesn't.
It's instant. It's like it's a raycast basically, but it has volume, and it can also kind of rotate as it goes through space.
Usually, like sweeps also happen like for this, like they happen outside of the simulation. So the physics engine is gonna do its simulation, and then you query it. So like you kind of probe it around, you know, do raycast and sweeps to figure out like where things are. So it is something that's usually like separate from it. Like the fixed time step is more what the physics engine does, like to run its own simulations and all calculations.
Yeah, it's kind of neat because like, as I was looking at the code more, I kind of realized that like raycasts and sweeps are kind of more similar than I thought, because a raycast can just be described as an infinitely small sphere sweep.
Kinda, but they also tend to use like more efficient math.
Yeah, well, I mean just effectively, like you can think about it like that. But yeah, I hope that answers that question.
And the next question is from Grand UK. Grand UK is asking, is there a way to go from ref ID to reference of a specific type, for example slot component? If not, what is the internal purpose of the reference ID flex node? So one way is like, you know, you would assign it to like a reference. I don't remember if you have like a dereference node, which is just gonna give you, you know, whatever the target is. It's something we might add at some point. Usually like, we don't recommend like working with reference IDs like directly. because they're like they don't give you any like information about the type of what they're like referencing. So like you kind of like doing a little bit more kind of low level stuff, and most of the times you just want to keep it with like the ties, but like it is there because it's an information that kind of exists. The main thing, you have to kind of treat them as an opaque like data point, because they do have like a structure to them, but the structure can change. So like you shouldn't be kind of relying on any specifics of it.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like a ref hacky use case, what you're alluding to almost. These are essentially like, you're basically working with pointers at this point, pretty much.
This is a little bit like pointer. It's more like a network one.
Yeah.
The next question is also from Gran UK. What is the type userref, not to be confused with the user reference type for? So it's essentially like a reference to a user, but it's a little bit smarter than just a direct reference. So when userref is assigned, it actually remembers both the machine ID and the user ID of that user. So if the same user rejoins the session, it's gonna reference to that user. If it was just a sync ref that's of type of user, when that user leaves, technically that instance of user is gone. And even if the same person joins again, it's a new instance of user, because like when they leave and then join, that the instance is deleted and then new instance is created, even if it represents the same person. The user ref, it makes that stable, so like it remembers this reference, this specific user. You can also save it in the world, so like if it's saved in the world and then user like left, or maybe they're not even in the world, like when you save, when they join again, it's gonna point towards that user. It figures out the specific instance of the user in the world and matches it based on their machine ID or the user ID.
I have a question real quick.
Yeah?
Can I go to the bathroom?
Yes. Well, you might miss the stop.
Oh, okay. I'll wait a sec then.
I think we're going for a green one, maybe.
Okay.
Oh, that's my hair. Hold on, let me fix that. I need to fix it, there we go.
I don't think we are.
It's the green. No?
We are.
Okay. I have this pinned. Oh, we're going to the green one.
No.
Yeah, I don't wanna. Oh, there's not too many questions, so like we can fuffle about a bit.
Yes.
We're going to the green one. We're going there. It's very pretty. Trust me.
Sparkly.
I really like this kind of mechanism. It's super neat because you can have like a bunch of like kind of social like places around this world and people kind of separated, but it's like this bus that's kind of connecting all of them together.
Yeah, I would kind of like to see. It would be kind of cool to see people make like a sort of like No Man's Sky-esque kind of world or even session travel system.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be even crazier. That's a big one. It's gonna be easier like once we have the domain system.
Go to warp speed to new sessions.
Yes.
And then you crash into them and they blow up and explode.
Why explode? Okay, I think we're going for the landing in a sec. Flying over. Let's see. We're landing.
I think we're like grazing the atmosphere.
Yeah.
Giving us a good look at the planet.
Ooh. Oh, we're going for it, I think. It's kind of cool because like when it flies over, you can also see it in the sky, just flying through. Come on. Yeah, this bus definitely does a scenic, like kind of scenic route.
It's like, ooh, look at the planet.
Look at the planet. You wanna be there? You wanna be there? You wanna go to the planet? Come on.
You like looking at planets, don't you?
Do you like looking at planets? Gonna We still have 40 minutes left, so we still have some time to ask questions once we land on the planet. Ooh, there we go. In the atmosphere now.
Yippee!
Yay. It's very pretty here. I'm gonna be landing. It's very pretty vistas too. It's like, look at that! Like you can see the Sithit planet too, and the other ones.
Yeah.
I really like this world. Ooh, oh, I'm in no clip. I think we're gonna be landing. We're going for the landing.
I think we're gonna land in some kind of like clearing.
No, there's a bus stop. It's right next to the thing. Oh, look at that! Like behind us, that's a nice view. We like.
Hmm.
Yeah, we did like several loops around the planet. I think it should be.
Yeah, we're gonna probably.
The stop is like
land.
somewhere over there.
It kind of looks like we're gonna land like right around this area.
Yeah.
Yeah, right over here.
Yeah, there's a stop there.
This is kind of where I wanted to get out earlier.
Yeah, like this is probably my most favorite place, like in this world, with the second one being the winter one.
I do like the autumn trees.
Yeah, it's very pretty. Instead of like Japanese gates. Let us out. Let us
We
out.
get it, the world's pretty!
Come on, we want out. There we go, there's the stop. It's like hidden between the trees.
Wow. Come on. Oh wait, let me grab your pen.
Ah! We can get out, yay.
Yay! We're free.
We're free.
Here, Froox, you forgot your pen.
Oh, that's okay, thank you. This is a nice spot, I think. Except I'm sitting on nothing now. Hold on, hold on, hold on.
Levitating.
Hold on, hold on. There we go. I can be sitting in the grass.
I was gonna say that you were levitating on your excitement to get out of the bus. Alright, can I go to the bathroom now?
Yes.
Alright, I'll be right
On
back.
some more questions.
I'll hide behind a tree.
There we go. That works. Yeah, this is very pretty. So the next question is from Grandy K. Grandy K is asking, and I have to move the Twitcher a bit. Is such a workshop system, would there be a way to do share folder but mark it so it doesn't show in the workshop, or would it be a separate system to share folder system we currently have? It's a separate system, so the workshop is essentially a completely separate system. Like the shared folders, they're not really designed for like, you know, that kind of like sharing, which is one of the reasons it's kind of janky for that. It's more meant to for like, you know, for personal sharing with things. So yeah, it's pretty much a separate system. You potentially could put like shared folder item into the workshop, but I don't know like what the use case would be. It would be like easier to just, you know, put the items themselves. The next question. I'm actually add a little light because I feel it's a little bit dark here, so fortunately, you know, there's like power over real-time editing. There we go. Make it a little bit bigger. That works, I think. Oh, maybe too much. There we go. The next question is from Grandy K. Have YDMS put much effort into the design of the multiprocess architecture that will replace the current architecture of Froox engine with the Unity yet, or will it be done later? Yes, there's been a bunch of work put into that. A lot of it's sort of research. So like, figuring out like one of the things actually, because I'm the person kind of handling that part, a lot of the stuff I've done is studying, how it's been done for web browsers, which were like, I think like the pioneer this kind of like approach. Google Chrome in particular, it was like I think the first one that sort of introduced the architecture, and then Firefox, it switched to it as well. And they do have like pretty good documentation on how this stuff works. I've read a bunch of articles, so I've kind of like went through a lot of that, figuring out like how they approached it, how Firefox moved to that approach, over time. And because they started like, without that architecture and they had to kind of replace it, which is, the similar situations we are in. So there's been a lot of that work done. It's also been work on like, researching sort of IPC mechanisms, which is one of the reasons like why I want to go with like shared memory, because shared memory is extremely fast. It's literally you have two processes that just share the same chunk of physical memory as if it was their own, meaning you don't need to like send data over pipe between them. Like you literally just access the memory. So that's another aspect, and also like just figuring out how are we really gonna move Froox engine into its own process. So a big part of it is figuring out what's preventing us from moving Froox engine into its own process, which is figuring out like where the kind of interactions are, which is why we're reworking making photon dust, and we're making audio right now. So, those are also things that kind of come part of it, because we have to, sort of prepare the system for that kind of separation. So it's kind of figuring out, like, where the lines of communication are and sort of reworking them so they can happen over some sort of like IPC mechanism. So, that's also work that's technically going towards, the multiprocess architecture. And that's been ongoing for a while now. So yeah, there's a bunch. There's also like some idea, like design ideas for how Froox engine will communicate. That one, it's still the specifics of it are gonna be like developed, but I do have a general idea how the communication is gonna happen, and a lot of the development has been, moving it towards that. Because, for example, the way photon dust is done, it's specifically designed so all the particle like simulation result data, it's a single data buffer. It's all like contained within a single like byte, just a single chunk of memory, and that's done on purpose. It's photon dust has been designed that way, so we can just make the chunk of memory be part of shared memory, and then the renderer can access it and render it out. So like a lot of the work that's been ongoing has been done specifically for the multiprocess architecture, because if we didn't, then we would end up reworking photon dust, reworking audio, and then we have to rework chunks of them again to work with multiprocess architecture. So like the work for that has been ongoing for probably longer than you might even think. Next question is from BD_. I'm gonna adjust the camera a little bit. BD_ is asking to clarify, if I have a static texture which is attached to a slot on object but otherwise unreferenced, would it be loaded and would it be pinned? So for it to be pinned, it has to essentially have the URL at the time of saving, when you save the world or the item. To be loaded, it needs to, it's gonna be loaded if it's referenced by something that uses the asset, which can be the material. So like if you have a material and that material is unreferenced, the texture is gonna be loaded right now. If it's not referenced by anything, then the texture will not load. But you really have to make sure like nothing is referencing it. If nothing is referencing it and it has the URL, it will still be pinned. So like the pinning doesn't depend. Pinning doesn't depend like what's the word? It essentially doesn't depend on like anything in the, but there's anything like using it in the world. Next question is from Granny K. How do you get a user ref? I don't know what you mean by get. It's like something that like components use. So, but there is
Oh.
there is a there is a store for it that you can use. So like maybe that's what you mean.
I think that's what they mean. You can find this under
Like there should literally be just
uh,
userf, yeah.
yeah, data model user ref store under variables, and this will get you a user ref store
Yeah.
or whatever you
So like if you want with protoflex, that's the one you can use, and that one will have that behavior because it uses userf like internally. Next questions from Grandy K. What is the point of editor components? For example, deleg editor, ref editor, they don't seem to enable editing except for primitive member editor. They are designed for internal use for inspectors, so they actually let you do like editing of references with the inspector, but that requires specific setup. Most of the inspector components are not really meant to be used directly. Like they're essentially just building blocks of the current inspector.
Yeah, and if you mean like editing as in like typing into them, they're editors for like dropping references into them and like that kind of stuff.
I kind of advise like against using those directly because they're more designed just for the current inspector. Next question is from Powderpup. With audio, is there any plans to implementing Fourier transforms for audio visualizations? Not for audio. That's not. It's not part of it. Like we do want to implement Fourier transforms at some point, but as a separate thing from the audio engine. What we kind of already talked about it, but like mostly what audio is doing is sort of collecting the audio outputs that are within your area, sorting them based on priority, computing distances, just doing distance attenuation, computing spatialization, and then mixing the results together into a single audio buffer. Stuff like Fourier transforms that would be like just a component or something that like works outside of that essentially. Like that one
Audio
probably wouldn't even
outputs
touch
in
like
where?
audio super much, other than just like listening to when audio audit happens, so it can compute a new frame of like update. Next questions from Moonbase. This song uses Apple loops. How do I know? My first song's these loops. Yeah.
This is some reply.
Next questions is from BD underscore. Do you have internal builds which already are running in multi-process model with a bunch of things broken, I imagine, or has not quite gotten that far yet? It hasn't gotten that far yet because in order to be able to do multi-process architecture, we need to like rework some of the systems. We did reworked the particle system, but another thing that's blocking it is the audio system, which is something that's being worked on right now. And since that isn't finished, we literally can't make the multi-process architecture. Usually when we develop things, like we're pretty like down to the wire. So like once we have internal builds, like you will hear about it. We post in devlogs, we will be talking about it, on our streams, like stuff like this. So yeah, those builds don't exist yet. They cannot exist because we're still working on things that are necessary to make those builds possible in the first place. And although those things are done, we cannot really make those builds either. It's also like doesn't make much sense because like if you're like focusing full time on like making the audio engine, we're gonna be focusing on that. We're not gonna be jumping back and forth between different tasks because that's very inefficient. Like it's trying like to juggle too many things, and you can end up with a situation where like like if say, and I'm not giving any specific like numbers, but say you have two things, each one of them takes 2 months to do on its own. If you try to do both of them at once, like switching back and forth, maybe each one of them now takes 5 months. So now instead of 4 total months, if you try to like go back and forth, now it takes 10 months. So it's not a very efficient way to kind of go about it. Next question is from World Theory 2013. Keeping track of what is a local versus global impulse and what context between all different types of nodes that use impulses is a bit confusing. Got any tips or rules of thumb that would be helpful to remember? I don't actually know what you mean by local or global impulse.
Oh, I don't know what they mean by that, but I kind of understand what they mean by like context, because it can be kind of hard to determine like what is like a sync or like an async context in that regard. I think that's what they mean by that one.
Maybe.
I don't know the first one though.
I would probably say just clarify your question though, like,
Yeah.
because we don't really have like a concept of global or local impulse, like that's not really a thing. So you need to probably give us like more context. The next question is from Red M17. I'm a newish user and I'm struggling to keep parity between social VR partners for my avatar. If I make changes to either the mesh or shape keys blend shapes, as each export from Blender and import to Resonite is essentially making the entire avatar from scratch again. In Resonite, is there anything planned that could make this type of situation easier to deal with? There's already a few things you can kind of do. One of them, for certain types of modifications, what you can do is if you import the new mesh, is you can just grab the reference to the new mesh and drop it on the existing avatar. If you haven't made any changes to the sets of bones, or you haven't made the changes, reordering like blend shapes, for example, that will generally just work. It'll just use the new mesh. If the bones or sets of shape keys have changed, like for example, you added some bones, removed some bones, or same like with blend shapes, then there's a tool called the Rig Transfer Tooltip that you can try using. What it does, it'll try to like map the new mesh, to the existing avatar and sort of remap things where needed. There's some bugs with it, so depending on the situation, it might not work correctly, but it might be worth a try because it can make your job like easier. For things to kind of help, one of them would be actually improving the tool so it's like more robust. Because we kind of like when you do make those kind of changes, like the system needs to figure out how to actually map it to the new avatar. Because if bones are added or removed or moved around, it needs to figure out what happened and how to like move your stuff between them. There also, I don't know actually if it's still, actually no, there's not. Yeah, I think that's kind of the main thing. It'd probably like just be like improving that tool to make things like this easier. There's another issue that sort of ties into this, which is adding like a component which would sort of track file system changes. So like if you import something from something and it detects, okay, this file has changed, it's gonna do the import and sort of tries to like map it for you. But that would just be like making the workflow easier, so like you don't need to like do manual import and then do the mapping. We just kind of trigger it automatically.
Yeah, this would be kind of more effort maybe on like your part too, but at least when I try and do stuff, I try and design some of my systems to be quite modular. So instead of like referencing like slots in my avatar and whatever like directly with like my protoflux and stuff, I'll like abstract them away into variables, and then I can kind of encapsulate all of the functionality of my avatar, or most of it, into like a little thing I can just drag and drop onto a new one, set up the new variables, and then there you go.
Yeah, that's always one of the things that can help too, is like whatever changes you can make to your own, kind of workflow and how you structure the avatar, that can make things easier. Granduke is asking, would it be worthwhile creating a new category in components for internal components to exist alongside uncategorized? I would just say generally, if it's uncategorized, consider it internal until told otherwise. Usually if components not really meant to be like used directly, it'll be uncategorized. Like we just don't bother categorizing it. So uncategorized is like a danger category. If you think there's a component, because some just might be forgotten to be categorized. If you think some component should be, usable globally, make a GitHub issue, say this component is uncategorized. Maybe it should be categorized, maybe it should be usable. At that point we can look at it and be like, okay, this one can be categorized, this one's okay to use, or we say no, this one's internal, avoid like using it. It might be like we might maybe make a category, like usually we put stuff like into debug. There's actually also a hidden category where we can just kind of hide them completely. So maybe. But yeah, like anything uncategorized, I would say treat it as internal unless, stated otherwise, unless you kind of put it into some category. And you can ask, like if you see one that like you feel is useful, like feel free to kind of make issue about it and ask us to categorize it, and at which point, we'll make the decision. World Theory 2013 is saying, in some cases poses are only generated and seen by single client, right? I hope that I have that right, that's what I mean by local. No, that's actually all of the impulses. Impulses always happen just on one client. It's sort of like, running a piece of code. And you're like, only one person is actually kind of running that code. Actually, how to put it? Like, each sort of like, every time an impulse starts, it starts on a specific user and it's always gonna complete on that specific user. There's like no mechanism for that impulse to like, transfer to another user. Like that's not really a concept that the system has. There's ways you can kind of trigger, you can make something start another impulse on a different user as a result of like actions you do within the impulse, but that's not like, like a native mechanism. The impulse is always going to start on one user and it's going to finish for that user. You can have multiple users sending out impulses for the same, protoflags. So you can have multiple people kind of running impulses, but for each of the user, the impulse is essentially local. Like there's, at no point, like, the impulse becomes global in any way. The way to think about it is, impulses are almost like, that's like you're doing things. Like everything in Resonite, it's kind of described by a data model. It's like, it's like values and numbers and strings kind of describing what things are. And that part, Resonite, that part is global, like by default. Resonite will make sure that it'll stay in sync for everyone. When you do impulses are like actions. Like for example, an impulse, it can like, go into a node that modifies a value. So it's a particular user doing that action where, they modify a value. Once they modify the value, you're modifying something that's global, and Froox engine is going to make sure that modification is, replicated on other clients. But, that's kind of separate from the impulse, because it doesn't care how that value got changed, it only cares that the global value got changed. But the impulse by itself is always kind of like local. So it's, yeah. Like, essentially, like, the best way to think about it is like impulses are, you have like, one shared data model. Actually, I'm gonna use the brush. Where did I put the brush? There it is. So if you like, think about it, imagine like you have the hierarchy, you have the scene, there's a bunch of things. And this is kind of describing your world. And you can think of this as shared. And then you have a bunch of users who can be doing things to it. So maybe like this user runs some impulses and the impulse will make modification and everyone will see that modification unless you've kind of driven this. And maybe this user will make modifications to this. And you essentially, each user is changing a shared whole. So it's like, like the impulses will always be happening on the user. And you can do a thing like where user generates, like with the impulses, they modify a value, and then the code on under user will trigger impulse, which will change something else. Like that can happen, but like, that's not a direct thing. And technically that impulse that happens on another user, that's a new sort of sequence of actions that happen for a specific user. I hope this kind of makes sense.
Yeah, it's not like a typical client-server model, sort of, where like you have a, like let's say I push a button. That action is not sent to the server, which then handles it. Yeah. I handle it.
Resonite actually does, like, it's something that is called like remote procedure calls, like in, net programming. Resonite has no remote procedure calls. Like, it's literally built completely without them, and it's kind of built without them on purpose, because in big part, it's, you know, what allows us to do what Resonite can do, because everything's modeled as data. Oop.
And also, before we go to the next
oh.
question, I almost forgot. There is actually a question that was missed in chat because they did not add a question mark.
Oh. Okay. Was it before this one, or...?
Yeah, it was before this one.
Okay. Make sure to add a question mark, otherwise, you know, it might get missed. Actually, I need a copy. Let me read it first. Alex Taco Anton is asking for clarifying question about external communication. The way Unix socket, Unix standard are named piped is also for security reason. TCP, HTTP is not secure enough. This was the reason for the question. I don't know if I agree on them being not secure enough. Like, you can make them pretty secure. Like, I don't really see why they would not be secure. Like, if there's like a bugs with it, like, you know, there's probably with your system like TCP stack that probably should be fixed. Yeah, like, we need to probably provide even more context, because like I don't think I agree with the assessment. Next question is from FizzyRabbitVR. I'm sorry if the material has been touched already, but is there yet or planned way to import animation file, PVH anim, etc. that is separate from model file? I like to make motion captures and assign them to NPCs to run designated times. There are some ways. You can also just import, you know, some of the anim files that are supported. We use a library called asimp for importing files. Like 3D models, and you can kind of import ones that are just pure animations. It's gonna generate sort of like, there are not gonna be any visuals, but you're gonna get like a hierarchy with animation tracks. The other way to do it is you can implement, you can use our own format called animj, and there's a number of community tools that lets you sort of specify animations as JSON files and then import them as animation tracks. And there's a component like animator that lets you sort of like derive things from those values, and there are also protoflex nodes that let you sample those animation tracks. Next question.
This was a response earlier.
Okay. So next question's from OZ. Very strange question, but is there a way you would suggest to visualize the bounding box of local slot, as in say what the default name box generate? So right now we don't have a way to do it. The main reason is because like anything that's local, like when you see a bounding box, that bounding box is global. Which means if it's global, it can only be based on things that are also global. So it's not gonna show anything, you know, that's kind of local. We're probably gonna add more tooling at some point, like, you know, for local things, but it kind of depends what you're trying to do exactly, because I don't know, like, what your use case is. Next question, Grand K. Is there a valid user for primitive member editor that isn't ref hacking, since you said editors are typically internal nodes? I think it's uncategorized. I would say, like, you know, probably not. Like, it's kind of meant like as an internal component, and we put a big warning on that component too. So it's
yeah, some of those editor components, they really are just made to be generated by the inspector.
Yeah.
So like, if you want to add inputs to like your UI or whatever, I know it's a little bit more cumbersome because those components look really handy, but I'd probably just parse it yourself in a lot of cases.
There's also like some other components that are more generalized, and we're probably gonna do that more like once we rework the inspectors, make very generalized components. But yeah, if it's in uncategorized, there's a good chance like it wasn't really meant to be like used directly, or maybe it was just forgotten. But in that case, you know, ask us, like, make a GitHub issue. Next question is from Grand UK. There are custom nodes currently being made, but like a way to represent variable inputs, like using volume multi-add, would using Perflex input list manager and categorized component be not recommended for this purpose? Yeah, like, probably wouldn't recommend, you know, that's kind of the same kind of realm of, you know, it's not really designed because the Perflex input list manager is designed to work with actual nodes, like the current sort of custom node, like nested nodes. Like custom nodes, like it's not something we would actually consider nested nodes. It's still technically just a bunch of nodes that are just masked to look as a single node, but technically it's not. And like, you know, the components are not really designed to work with that. So yeah, like that's also kind of danger territory. Like we would probably just like for actual custom nodes, like we're just gonna implement, you know, the nested nodes because there's already a mechanism that's designed for that purpose.
Yeah. I probably wouldn't like, how would I say it? You're adding quite a bit of overhead by trying to make custom like nodes like yourself right now. Like and using them like all over the place as well. I actually don't know where I was going with that. I apologize.
We also ran out of questions, so if you still, we got 10 minutes left, so if you got any more questions, feel free to ask. Yeah, short questions. No, like super long ones at this point. There's always like this
on Resonite in total.
It was tell us, like, you know, the complex philosophy and history of Resonite in the last minute that remains. There's always like a few that kind of pop out like at the you know, that kind of pop out at the end of the thing.
Oh dear.
We got another one from BD underscore. Are there any good samples worlds for showing how to get started with new particle system components? There's like one from an MMC. Like, I don't know how much it'll help, you know, getting started. But I think it can, because like it's kind of fun way to play with it. It's called Particle Synthesizer by P. So it's this world. Why is it actually rendered? No, it's mirrored. Let me do this. Particle Synthesizer by P. So this world, you essentially have like, it has a bunch of the components, like the modules for photon dust, as sort of like these items you can grab. You can slot them in a grid, and you can just mess around with them. They build like, you know, kind of more simplified sort of UI for it. So that can be a good way to, you know, just mess around and see what the different modules do. So maybe this one. And a lot of the, you know, a lot of the modules that are in there, they're actual like, you know, photon dust component modules. So like once you kind of use the inspector to build things, that's you know, like it's gonna, like, this is gonna be a lot familiar because it's gonna use the same terms, same names for things. So that would be a good one. I would also just recommend, you know, just grab a developer tooltip. Actually, I'll just show that too. Literally just, you know, grab a developer tooltip, make a new particle system, and mess around with it, because that's one of the best ways to learn with particle system is, you know, you just mess with things that are in there. You know, you look, you know, there's a value, there's a rate. What if I, you know, add a 0? Now I have more particles. You look at it, you know, it's particle system, there's a bunch of modules. If you go attach component, there's a whole bunch of stuff under rendering particle system, there's modules, and there's a lot of these. So like, you know, pick whichever one, like, you know, sounds interesting. Say gravity force. I picked that one. You know, you add it into the modules. Oops, I replaced one by accident. Add it there, and, you know, the particles are falling. And you kind of mess around with things like this way and see what stuff does. And there's a good way to kind of learn about particle system is just mess around. Like, it's like it's one of those kinds of systems, you know, like where the more you mess around with it, the better you kind of understand and the better you know how to make lots of different effects.
I'm meaning to add some of my examples to like the public folders. I will do that eventually. I'm sorry I haven't gotten around to it.
Yeah, it'd be kind of cool too. Or even like, if you see like cool items, like I actually have like one that Modern Balloony has made that I really like. Oftentimes you can like, find cool items that are using the FX, like this one. And, this one does these kind of cool effects. And sometimes you find items like this, and you can literally, ask the person, but you can, take it apart, see how it's made. That's another good way to kind of learn. There's also this one's neat. Wee.
That's cool.
It's pretty. Next question is from Red M17. For making the workflow of avatar creation import better, where's the best place to ask for it so that it could be worked on? Always like the best place is our GitHub. I think there already is an issue for it, so it's something, that we do want to work on. It's just a matter of, priority. So I would say, like, check the GitHub, see if the issue is already there. Give it an upvote, because it kind of lets us prioritize it a bit better. But it's something that will happen regardless, sooner or later. Like, we do want to work on it. It's just a matter of priorities, because right now we're focusing heavily on performance. So checking time, 5 minutes left. Next question is from Alex Taco Anton. What do you think about communities that are made inside Resonite and expanded to... Hold on, I need to move this. And expanded to different platforms to give more people into Resonite as the editing and social platform things? I think it's pretty cool. Like, I mean, like the big platform of, the community, or big platform of... I cannot talk. Big part of the platform, and what gives it its life is the community, and having lots of different communities. Because every time somebody comes, to Resonite, people have different interests, different backgrounds, and having lots of different communities, that kind of helps them, find their place and kind of grow the community and kind of, pass on like what Resonite's about, like, so it like... I feel like, it's a really good thing. And the more communities we get, and the more diverse communities, like, the better. Genedik is asking, are there ways to make pop-up context menus, for example, confirmation dialog? Yeah, there's like a number of ways. Like one of them, you can make custom context menus. There's like systems for that. So like, if you just want that, like you can use that subsystem. You can also literally just build your own, like, worlds, like in items, you can literally just build your own UI and your own system for it. Like, for example, this world even has like, its own menu, its own UI menu, and it has a whole bunch of like things. There's like, various like toggles, like, I think that turns out the leaves off now. I don't know which one does which. Asteroids, like, let's see, asteroids, turn them off, there go, grab pillows, video players, furniture colliders. So you can make, stuff, and you can just, if it's on your own UI, you can just make it do whatever you want it to do. But the simplest way might be to just, piggyback on the context menu, because it's already pre-built, system. We got 2 minutes left, so this might be the last question. If you got another short one, maybe it'll fit in, but no promises. Unskilled Wolf is asking, for driven values, do they always get updated each frame? If I had a drive that depends on a few rarely changing inputs and a lot of math, is there anything I need to do to optimize this? So yeah, the system for protoflags, it actually tracks, when values change. So when you source, like, when you make a drive, if all your source values are, values that do not change continually, and also in the whole chain of, like, driving that value, you are not using any nodes that would generate continuous updates. Like, for example, SmoothLerp. SmoothLerp will generate continuous updates, because even if the input is not changing, the output might be, changing continuously. It's just like, updating it. If you avoid stuff like that, the system will automatically optimize, and it will sort of build a list of like, what values can change and which values trigger which changes. So it'll only update when any of the inputs actually change. If there's at any point in the chain there's something that generates continuous changes, like even for example, using like the T node. If you use the T node, you do some math, use some other values, the driven value is going to be updated every frame because the T updates every frame. But if all the sources are, not changing continuously, then the driven value is also not going to be computed every frame. Generally, like, you might not even like notice like, this happening because like it'll just update whenever it needs to, but the system does optimize under the hood. It's also pretty much the time, so we unfortunately don't have time for the last question. With this, thank you very much, everyone for watching. I hope like you enjoyed the stream. Thank you for asking all the questions. Thanks, Ira, for being here, helping, helping answer the questions. Thank you everyone, for also making all the cool things on the platform. Like, thank you like for Hamocorp, like, and the rest of the team for making this super cool world. Like, it's very pretty. Like, I like going, through and hosting each Resonance on a different one. And for everyone, supporting us Patreon and through Stripe, thank you so much because you're helping us, keep going at this, making this platform better, like every day, like, and just kind of working on the big things and the small things. We'll see you, like, with next stream. I'm gonna check if there's anybody to raid, so give me a second. Anybody streaming Resonite? Looks like there's only Creator Jam, so we'll send you their way. And also, one more thing, if you're supporting us Patreon currently, please consider switching to Stripe, because even if you switch to the same tier, we actually get more money out of it. There's, like, Patreon on average, they take about 15%, Stripe on average takes about 5%, so like we literally get like, more money for the same amount like you're giving, for the same amount you're paying, which if everybody switched, like, we would literally get like a few $1,000s more each month, which we can, then invest back into the project. So with that, I'm gonna set up raid for Creator Jam. Creator Jam. Can I get it ready? There we go. So raid should be ready. Okay, here's it. So tell me they're like hi for us, and if you're there, like I don't know if the Creator Jump's just still open, but I made a Froox nums in the food court in there earlier today, so maybe you'll see it. Anyways, thanks you very much for watching. Thank you, for everything, and like see you next week.
Bye.
Raid. Oh, Splunk.